Oh, hi. Mark Pearson, Executive and Artistic Director of the College Light Opera Company. Welcome to Off the Clock, a weekly show where I get to interview CLOC alums. Off the Clock is made possible by a generous gift from Hope Lincoln Baker. This week, I got to catch up with CLOC alum and professional stage manager Fatimah Amill. Let's hear what she had to say. Great. I'm thrilled to be here with Fatimah, a former stage manager, College Light Opera Company. Thank you so much for being with us for Off the Clock. Could you remind us when you were at CLOC?
Yeah, so my name is Fatimah. My pronouns are she, her, and I was at CLOC the summer of 2015 and 2016. So I was there the summer after my junior year of college, and then the summer after I graduated, right before I moved to New York City.
Great. And what do you do now in New York?
I'm a freelance stage manager. So I got my equity card in 2017, and then I've just been freelancing around, mostly in like the off-Broadway theaters and PAing and subbing in Broadway shows or commercial shows.
Great. For those of us who might not know, can you explain what a PA is?
Yeah, so PA stands for production assistant, and it's usually it's someone who's part of the stage management team. You're a stage manager, and you do the same work, and you kind of just help like facilitate the rehearsal studio, do anything that the assistants need. Basically, like you mostly answer to the assistant stage managers. Depending on what kind of show you're a production assistant on, you can go on to tech the show and help like run it through previews with them, doing whatever the stage managers need. Usually it's like line notes. Sometimes it's helping them on deck, but not all the time. And then if they can, they'll keep you on to sub when they need to call out and stuff like that.
Great. And what is helping on deck?
Helping on deck. So like during tech and stuff like that, a lot of what assistant stage managers are doing is taking notes about changes, things that's changing with the set, things that's changing with props, and kind of just making sure all the actors are there depending on how big the cast is. I just worked on a cast, I think of 26 people. I'm not sure how many people, a lot of people, and 5 floors of dressing rooms. So it was a lot of like, okay, we're about to go into this next scene, so let's make sure we have all the female company members here and all this other stuff, and just making sure that they're not waiting for us out when the director and the stage manager are ready to move on.
Great. And I think what's interesting, just to lay the groundwork there, I think a lot of people assume there's one stage manager, and this is usually not true on a big production.
Right.
Can you explain what that hierarchy is like, and also why there needs to be that hierarchy?
I mean, honestly, like, I don't really, like, I guess, yeah, it's a hierarchy because there's like a difference in like pay and like a little bit of responsibility, but it's really like a team. Like, the PSM is out there and they're working with the designer, especially specifically during tech, they're working with the designers and the director to make sure that everything is kind of moving smoothly, and they're trusting their assistants and even the production assistants. I've been pretty lucky to be in a lot of teams where my PSMs and ASMs have they're like, you're part of the team, like you're helping us, and like you are a necessary part of this team. And trusting that they're making sure that things are happening backstage while you're making sure that things are happening like from the house. So I don't really see it as a hierarchy because we're all kind of working together to make sure that it's all coming together smoothly.
And how do you normally communicate during a production?
Overhead, like comm? Is that what you're asking me?
Yes. What is a comm?
It's
this is stage management 101.
So everyone, even like the crew, have headsets, and this PSM is talking to you through that headset. PSM is talking to the designers as well. So everyone has like different channels, so that like if you're on deck backstage and you need to talk to the other assistant or the other production assistant, and you don't want to bother the PSM who's talking to the lighting designer on a different channel, you just, instead of channel A, you use channel B. So it's just a way to communicate quickly.
Yeah. I actually have a follow-up question there that I was just thinking about. How much, or has that changed at all now with smartphones and technology? Do you find yourself, you're also texting at the same time, or do you have regulations about not using your personal devices?
I don't know if there's like really it's like not cute to do it. Like, but I guess like, I don't know. I have been in situations where like the PSM has texted me from the tech table to be like, hey, I'm so sorry, like, can you bring me a pencil? Just because they're like, they have so many, specifically the PSM has so many voices coming through to them because everyone's talking to them.
Right.
But not usually. I think it's like fastest to kind of be on comm, especially because a lot of theaters too are like, you walk in at ground level and then go down into the house, and then like you're down even further into the green room and dressing room and stuff like that. So like you don't really have service anyway.
That's right. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Um, Fatima, how did you get into theater, and specifically, were you always interested in technical behind the scenes theater, or how did that evolve for you?
Yeah, this is actually my favorite story. I feel like I don't get to tell it enough. But basically, when I was 12, my best friend at the time, her older siblings were in the high school production of Into the Woods. And I didn't really know about theater or anything like that. I didn't grow up like going to see shows or, but she was just like, oh, my sister is the baker's wife. Do you want to come see this at the high school? And I was like, I guess, like, I don't know what that is. And so we went. And I specifically remember this like scene change that happened, and there was like flats painted like rocks and trees, and like the baker's wife was, doing whatever she does. And my friend leaned over to me and was like, my brother's behind that rock. And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, he takes design tech, he's behind that rock. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but I have to do it. I have to find out what that is.
I have to be that rock.
I have to be behind that rock. And so it was like, I don't know, it was life-changing, honestly. And so like, I basically like finished off like middle school with like, okay, as soon as I get to the theater, like to the high school, like I'm gonna take design tech. I don't know, that's all my only plan. And so I signed up for it and I loved it. And then my like high school teacher, we were really lucky that like our program, the facilities that we had were really nice because it was like the Performing Arts Center for the city. So they hired on the high school tech students to like run the dance competitions that happened. I did like political debates. I did like church, like lighting design for church services. It was like a weird experience. And I learned a lot. And I was just like, oh, you can like do this for real.
Right, this can be a career.
Yeah, so I took dance classes just because the same best friend took dance classes, and I was like, oh, that sounds fun, but I was never like, I don't know, I never like performed. I always got yelled at for not smiling. I hated when I had to be in like the small group numbers. And so it was really like, I've never been interested in performing or like anything other than stage managing.
Great. So that was going to be my next question. So you saw that there was sort of technical theater. You discovered that was a thing.
Yeah.
And as you go down that rabbit hole, you found stage management. So
right.
Did you kind of flirt at all with like design and production, or were you like, no, I want to manage this ship?
Yeah. Well, in high school, it was like, my teacher kind of was like, oh, I think you would probably be a stage manager. So I like did what quote unquote stage managing was at like 16, which was mostly just like setting props and then like calling light cues, which, in the professional world, you don't touch the props and like, things like that, where like you learn as you like grow and like work in more places. But we also like, I mixed musicals and like helped with lighting, and I learned how to like focus a light and things like that you learn in like educational settings because they want to make sure that everyone knows how to. It's also like being a stage manager, it's helpful to know things like how to focus a light and like, maybe
also,
like to help you communicate.
Yeah, exactly. Wouldn't you say that just acquiring that vocabulary makes you so much more kind of like legit in the room?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's definitely like, obviously people come from different backgrounds and different like education opportunities. Like not everyone, I was very lucky to be able to go to a university with a good theater program and a BFA stage management program, but it's okay if like you don't come from like an educational background. It's just like willing to like be open to learning, like, oh, okay, like let me just learn how to focus this light, and like it'll definitely like help you out in the future. It's never bad to like learn a little bit more about the other parts of design tech.
Mm-hmm. Great. I want to ask you a couple things about your time at CLOC. Do you have any productions that stick out in your head as
either good experiences or really bad, challenging stage management experiences. I mean, it's a big job when you're
Yeah.
the one person managing those 9 productions.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think anything really like sticks out. It's like at this point, it's kind of all just kind of like meshed into
One big,
uh like a big blob, especially because I went like 2 summers in a row.
right.
I do remember like being really tired, but I like having so much fun. Like even though like, you know, you're the first one up in the morning getting ready to go to rehearsal, like making sure that things are set up, like you're pretty much the last one to bed depending on how like social you are. But like you have to like get things done in preparation for tech or in preparation for like first rehearsal for the next show, and then also like socializing with people if that's what you want to do. And I enjoy I always say my favorite part of theater is the community part of it, and CLOC is definitely like a little community, and just at the end of the day, like having a drink with like whoever was in town, or like
Yep.
you know your core group of people that you're like, oh, I just gotta like decompress, and like yeah.
Did you, I've been asking this of a couple of alums, did you have a favorite beverage when you were here, and did it involve ice or not?
I was drinking like a lot of cranberry vodkas, but I was also like I was like
Okay, Prada.
freshly 21 and like not good at drinking. And so like now to like think back at that, I'm like, ugh. Like, I also like shotgunned a lot of beers, which like to think about doing now, like actually physically brings pain to me. And so yeah.
Yeah. Different time, different
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Ice was like if I had like planned it, but usually no.
Can you tell us about what the process of taping out is for a rehearsal? Because I think that's an interesting thing that many people don't know happens, and happens very bizarrely here at CLOC.
Yeah. So taping out in general is like you get the ground plan from the senior designer and you prep the rehearsal space for rehearsal, and you know, you take a scale ruler and you usually have your team there with you, and like usually in my experience the PSM is you know, telling you go 3 feet stage left and then go up stage 4 feet or whatever, and plot a point there, and then we'll lay out the lines. At CLOC, well, I'll just say first of all, I don't like taping out that much. I don't really
Does anyone like taping out?
yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I got a B in my drafting class because I cried about it. And so I was just like, this is not like holding a scale ruler like brings me sheer terror. And I'm just like, please let me just like crawl on the floor and you tell me the points and like whatever. But I was very lucky to have the scenic designer. I think I don't remember if Matt did. I had people helping me. I don't remember specifically everyone, but I know Josh helped me my second summer there. But I was lucky enough to just have people who were like, oh, are you taping by yourself right now? Oh, let me help you. Let me help you so you can come drink with us. And so like, it was cool. And like, I set like a schedule for myself. I was like, I think like every like Wednesday night or Thursday night, I was like, okay, every night this week, like I'll go and tape so I don't have to worry about it. It's harder with the humidity. That's kind of like the heartbreaking part of it, but like
Right.
don't have to deal with that as much anymore.
Right. Yeah. A lot of the challenges are very CLOC specific or camp specific.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the living room here, right? Which also
Right.
makes it a challenge because it's getting more traffic than even just rehearsal traffic on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you wake up or you come in after lunch and then all your tape lines are gone.
Right. All like people decided to have like an impromptu sing along around the piano and they dragged all the benches around, and I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
Sick.
And I think it's also interesting to talk about, you know, rehearsal spaces versus the actual space. And I imagine it gets a little bit easier in the professional world, but maybe not necessarily as wonderful as we're told in education, that, you know, someday you'll have a rehearsal space that's exactly the same size as your performance space.
Right. And that's not, I mean, I feel like that's still not very, unless you're very, very fortunate to be working for a show with like, who can bring in a deck for you or something like that. But yeah, you have to kind of be communicative with the director and the senior designer and be like, okay, what are the places that we like for sure want to see? And like upstage has an extra 10 feet of just, when I did Rose Tattoo, it was like 10 feet of flamingos. So we're going to cut 5 feet of those flamingos just kind of off so we don't have to tape all that out, so we can have more of the deck area. And so, yeah.
Right.
Luckily there's like, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, luckily there's like a designated area where like the directors and music director always kind of are at CLOC, like on the staircase. So it's not like you have to be like, okay, we're gonna set your table here. Oh, you want more space? Okay, cool. Let's cut off more flamingos. So.
Right. So are you still in contact or friends with some folks from CLOC when you were here?
Yes, a couple of people. Michael Belsky and I still talk pretty often. Juliana, who was, I don't remember what she was my first year, but like the business manager my second year. We were at CLOC both years together.
Right. I think she started as publicist and then went to business management, I think.
That sounds right. She's been like, she's part of our friend group now. Like sometimes I forget like that we met at CLOC and it's just like, oh, Jules is coming over. She plays D&D with my boyfriend. It's incredible. She just recently moved out of New York City and was living in this gorgeous 2-bedroom, and we copped that, and I'm very excited to be living in it. So yeah.
You're moving into her apartment?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Gorgeous 2-bedroom, Washington Heights. Thanks, CLOC.
So since you've been working, have you had any project that you're particularly proud of, or was a really interesting challenge for you?
Yeah. Well, I went to Puerto Rico with Hamilton, which was, that's always like the the one, and that was really. It was really, really fun, and like my family, I'm half Puerto Rican, and so like it was really like important for me to go. It was kind of like basically it got announced and I was like, I don't know how, but I'm gonna work on that. And then it just kind of like happened, like very much I secreted my way onto Hamilton, but
Wait, I think you need to elaborate. How did you secret your way onto Hamilton?
Like, just like speaking it into existence. I mean, and obviously sending emails to as many people as I knew, but like, speaking it into existence. And also like, they interview you and like hopefully. And
there's also that.
Yeah, like hopefully they like you and bring you on and you work with a team. So that was really cool, and I'm trying to think of what to say. It's interesting being like a first generation person that grows up in the States because like you have like a different relationship with like your culture. And so like my relationship with my Puerto Rican culture is very like Americanized, and also like since my parents both immigrated here, they taught me English first. So my Spanish is very much like someone who speaks English first. And so going to work in Puerto Rico was interesting because I don't know the Spanish words for a lot of theater stuff.
Yes, right, the technical terms.
Yeah, I know like I know like I've never taken a class. And so like I know like colloquialisms and like how to talk to my grandma. And so I was there and like, I had to go out and like buy people food, and I had to go out and like order things and like, communicate with Uber drivers because we like had one rental car that we had to share. So sometimes I had to take an Uber somewhere. And so like, it was just a lot of like, okay, we have to use what you got, and just like immersive, like, which was great. And like, honestly, like I would do it again. It was amazing.
So all told, how long were you on the island?
We were there for the whole run, which doesn't always happen. The production assistants, well, we were told that we probably weren't going to go to Puerto Rico. They were just going to keep us for the rehearsal process, which is typical. And then they usually say that because they don't know you and they want to see like, how well you do in the room and like if you mesh with the team, which is really important because it's like, if the team isn't cohesive, then it's really hard to make things run. And then they were like, okay, we'll bring you to Puerto Rico. And so my head, I was like, okay, till opening, I guess. And they were like, no, the whole run. So we were there for 6 weeks, the 6-week run. And it was, I think 3 or 4 9-show weeks. So I didn't have a lot of time of like going to see family, or like on Mondays we utilize those days off, but like it was a lot of just being in the space in the theater.
Wow. Great. Yeah. Any projects in New York that you want to talk about?
Wait, hold on. I've been doing a lot more ASMing off Broadway, which I'm like really proud of. And like, I was really excited for 2020 because I had like a lot of ASM contracts lined up. So that was cool because I was doing a lot more, just kind of like moving up a little bit in like the types of jobs I was getting offered. And I was PAing on like bigger Broadway shows where I could sub. So I subbed on the Rose Tattoo.
Could you remind us of what that means to sub?
Yeah, so usually once a show opens, especially like bigger commercial shows that have longer runs, they will train the assistants to call the show so that the PSM can either go out into the house and note it every once in a while, or like that everyone kind of knows how to do everyone's job so that if someone calls out, someone can step in.
Great. And just for clarification, calling the show is?
Wow, calling the show is like making like the lights happen and the sound happen and like,
right,
you know, things like that. Like every time a light cue happens, that's a PSM calling it, usually. Sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you're the magician behind the curtain.
Yeah. We like conduct it, I guess. Like
yeah, no, that's a great analogy. It's the technical conductor.
Yeah, exactly. So when the ASM learns how to call a show, they usually bring on a sub. Sometimes it's the production assistant because the cast already knows them. They already know the show. So if it works out with people's schedules, then they can do that. So I wasn't originally actually supposed to sub on Rose Tattoo. That was supposed to be like a short thing. And then I was going to go on to, I was ASMing Fires in the Mirror at Signature, which was like, oh, that was so fun and such a good show. And I was like so proud to be on it. And then something happened where they needed a sub, and it was a very special situation where they needed someone who knew the company. They were just like, we can't bring a stranger here, like just for how the show worked. So I was able to make it work with my company at or with Signature, where Fires in the Mirror was happening. So I was doing Fires in the Mirror and Rose Tattoo at the same time, which is like, I think very specific to New York theater. Like I think like all the New York theaters are very much like, oh yeah, you can do matinees over there, and do like, people make it work depending on like what the situation is. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, well, one of the questions I want to ask you is, people might not understand, a stage manager, you're working from gig to gig, you're going job to job, and sometimes kind of trying to balance multiple, jobs that are overlapping. How do you get a job, and how do you go from one job to the next? Yeah,
so from like pretty early on, I kind of was like, because I PSM'd at CLOC, and then I came to New York and did an apprenticeship. And then after my apprenticeship, I was like, I think I like assisting better. I PSM'd a couple things at my apprenticeship, and I was just like, yeah, I like PSMing is cool and like it's fine, but I just like prefer assisting. And so that's a little bit easier even to get work, because you just like assist someone, and then that person, if they like you, they just bring you on to like whatever jobs they get. So it's kind of just like, I don't know, like communicating with the people in your community and being like, hey, like I'm available in August, just so you know. And like literally like people will text you. A friend of mine will be like, hey, what are you doing in September? Or, so that's kind of how I've been getting a lot of my work. Early on, it was more like emailing my resume to kind of the first info email I could find at like random commercial theaters. But it's really about like people and like community and like your friends bringing you places. So, yeah.
Do you find that stage management is sometimes, because I know this happens sometimes with design teams, where they end up, working with one or a couple of directors, and that kind of becomes their group. Is that true in stage management?
I do know a couple of PSMs who directors really like them and bring them on to their projects, and that makes it easy for them to kind of bring the assistants that they want on. Sometimes certain theater companies will be like, we can't have all white people on your team, or like, like things like that, where it is important to like diversify your pool of people. And like, as much as I love working with my friend Brett, sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I should, work for another PSM so that like more people know who I am. And so I do think that happens a lot, but I don't think that it's necessarily always positive.
Right. Then you kind of get into that tunnel.
Right, because then you're not learning from new people anymore, and that's like part of the fun of it, is like working with a new person, and then they're like, look at this cool thing I can do. Like someone, I can't even remember, they like made an email list of like the whole company's names, and then they were able to generate all the paperwork with everyone's name. So instead of like retyping their name onto like the cover sheet for their script and like the sign-in sheet and the calendars and stuff like that, they just typed it one time, and then it generated all the paperwork. And I was like,
geeked out.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know how to do that. And that is so cool. And like, if I was only working with the same team over and over again, I probably would have never learned how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a brief amount of time stage managing in Germany. And I remember one of the most fascinating things is just sitting down with other stage managers to see how they take notes in rehearsal. And like looking at, your book and then someone else's book. And you're like, Wow, that's a
Yeah.
completely different language.
Yeah, it's like there's not a right way. Like there's not just one way to do it. As long as it, honestly, for me, I'm like, if it works for you and like things are running smoothly, like who cares? Just do it.
Yeah, yeah. So what would you say are the most important qualities for a successful stage manager?
Honestly, like I just think someone who's personable. Like if you're, no one wants to be around someone who is kind of like they don't trust. Like especially company members and like directors and like even the crew people, like if they don't trust you or want to be around you, like they're not gonna hire you again.
Yeah, I mean,
You
the
can
stage
make,
manager has kind of like a company therapist responsibility.
yeah, and you can make the most beautiful paperwork in the world and like get your MFA at the best college in the country, but like if no one wants to be around you, no one's gonna hire you. So yeah, that's kind of like me. I'm like, as long as you have a personality and like can make people laugh, I think you could be a good stage manager, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Do you are you working mostly now in shows with music or without music, or is it both?
Um, I'm not doing a lot of musicals right now just because there's not a lot of new musicals off Broadway, or there wasn't a lot this past season that didn't already have a team. When I did Rose Tattoo was kind of like it turned into like a play with music, a lot of music cues and stuff like that, but it wasn't intended to be that when I got brought onto it. But yeah, I think Hamilton, and then I did a workshop for a new musical after Hamilton, and that's kind of like the last like musical I did.
Do you have a preference one way or the other, or is it all the same?
I think like musicals are really fun, and I always kind of forget how much fun I have on them, but I don't really have a preference. I'm kind of just like down to work, honestly. Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the process of a stage manager? So if you, and maybe what would be interesting talking about like a new work, you know, because you've done a lot of that. You get the contract that you're going to be working on a new show. What are the next steps? Like what goes through your head and what's your checklist?
Honestly, it's like you get an email and it's like, are you available? You say yes or no. They're like, great. And then you don't hear from them for a few weeks. And then if you're assisting, you hear from the PSM and you're like, okay, we're gonna prep. So prep is kind of like where everything kind of starts, because especially for union stage managers, that's like your first paycheck. So like, I personally try not to do anything before prep, but some people do, and that's fine too. I mean, I try to read the play, that's helpful, but you even don't have to do that. And you show up and basically, depending on the need, so for a new work, it's kind of just like, okay, when is the last updated script going to come in so that we can make sure that on the first day of rehearsal, everyone starts with the same script? Because there's nothing worse than like someone being like, oh, my line on this line is on page 32 for me, but it's on page 42A for him. So that's a lot of, you know, making sure that everyone is organized with the same script. Just a lot of like, honestly, spelling people's names over and over again. Like I said, like making like script covers, making a call board, taping out the set, talking to the props people to make sure that like all the rehearsal props are coming in. Sometimes they need like rehearsal set pieces that get like installed in, like kind of coordinating like when we're going to be in the space, when scenic is going to come into the space.
Can I pause you there for a second? Why is rehearsal scenery important? I mean, usually people think, well, you tape it out on the floor and that's enough.
Yeah. I mean, like a rehearsal shelf, right? If you tape out a box on the floor, you're like, that's the shelf. But if you have a shelf there, then, you know, the actor can be like, oh, I'm going to put the cup here. And you as the stage manager can know, okay, they always put the cup on the downstage end. So like when I set it for them, because we're going back to the beginning of the scene, I can make sure that the cup ends up on the downstage end. And so it's a lot of just like making it as close as possible to them for when they step on stage. The actors.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of kind of forensic files that involved in stage management. When the director comes in and says, all right, we're going to pick it up, act 2, scene 3, you know, the monologue after the fight. And you're like,
and you're just like, okay, the pillows are over here, like the cup's there, the papers are on the floor. Oh no, wait, she hasn't thrown the papers yet.
Yes, right.
Yeah, so it's a lot of that. A lot of I did a lot of like video recording too, which is like, okay, then you can kind of like go back and be like, okay, this is how the papers end up.
Yeah, because the worst is when you're the stage manager and you think you have it set up and they get like 5-10 minutes into the scene and you threw the papers and they hadn't thrown the papers and you see her go for the papers and you're like,
Yeah, and you're like, oh, oops. Yeah.
my bad.
That was a lot. I did a lot of that on Fires in the Mirror because that was a one-person show. And so basically once the show started, he was on stage and all the props were in these like 2 boxes basically. And they were set very specifically to how he needed it. But every time, like, because you get used to it after running the show for like 4 weeks or whatever, you're like, oh, I know exactly how this goes. But every time I made sure to be like, I have to check this because once the show starts and he's out there, like, there's nothing I can do about it.
Right, there's no saving him.
Yeah. So stuff like that is kind of scary, but
Yeah.
you know.
So I think we have to talk about COVID-19. What have you been doing?
Listen, I'm chilling. Like, my boyfriend's working. I'm his housewife. Like, it's this time last year, I was like, I'm gonna be a working mom. I'm gonna like support my family. Like, this is incredible. Like, I cannot wait to just like continue working until like I can't anymore. And then COVID-19 happened, and I was like, okay. Sick. I guess I'll just be here. So I've been doing a lot of like crafting a little bit, a lot of video games.
Did you have any projects ongoing when New York shut down?
Yeah, I was in rehearsals for a play at Playwrights Horizons.
And how far along?
We were only in like 4 weeks in, but it was a short rehearsal process. So we were like a few weeks away from tech, I think. Like, we were doing I was making paperwork and like, you know, we were kind of placing props and like scenery, having those like meetings that you have right before going into like tech. And our playwright is a doctor. And so she was like coming in the last few weeks before the shutdown being like, are we like, I don't think this is gonna, I don't know about this.
And all the artsy people in the room were like, we're gonna make this happen.
Yeah, even me and my PSM were both like, we're just gonna wash our hands. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And yeah, it even got to the point where like the custodians were like coming into the room and kind of like sanitizing the door. Like, we were like, oh, you know, this is extra, but like, cool. Like, I'm glad that this is happening and making the company members feel okay. It's fine. I never really thought it would escalate to like a total shutdown until like it happened, I guess. Like, the night before the shutdown happened, I was out at a friend's birthday party and the TVs were showing that like the NBA was getting like canceled for the season or something like that. And I was just kind of like, uh-oh. I was like, Broadway houses are a lot smaller than NBA like stadiums. So I kind of knew that we were next after that.
So do you know what the future is for that particular project, or is it just on ice?
Yeah, it was like totally loaded in. So from everything that the general manager's been saying to us, they're like, we fully intend on producing this as soon as we can. And that we have first dibs when it comes back. So I was very lucky to be in that situation where I was in the middle of that show that plans on coming back. And then I had another contract right after that they plan on bringing back as well. So I was very lucky.
What is that project?
It's a play at Roundabout Theater Company. I was going to ASM at their off-Broadway space.
Yeah. A new play?
Yeah, I think it's called What the End Will Be. I didn't get to really like start anything on the process because it was supposed to start like this week was supposed to be opening. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so I didn't get to like read it or anything like that because it was just like so far. It was probably like a month and a half before even prep was supposed to start. Yeah. Gotcha.
So do you have any crystal ball feelings about when things are going to open up?
I heard like whispers of like rehearsals starting in December that I just don't feel like is realistic. And like January is not great anyway, because there's just not, shows don't sell as well in January. So I honestly feel like March, like in the spring, summertime next year, which like makes me sad, but also it's like, you know, you have to be realistic and like, I don't want to start too soon and then put actors in danger and like, cause like, yeah, I guess you could socially distance the audience and I guess you could like put masks on the actors, but the actors are sweating on each other. They're in a lot of dressing rooms are really tiny. Backstage areas are not big. Stage managers are constantly like up, like next to you. Dressers are up next to you. Like, I think there's more behind the scenes that makes it a lot harder than just like, okay, we're going to socially distance the audience.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. You know, I think a lot of non-theater folks, the public, when they think about opening a theater, the first place they go is, oh, well, how do we make the house, the audience space
Yeah.
effective? Oh, well, you could remove aisles, you could space people, and they go through that process without realizing the insurmountable challenges on stage and backstage for
Yeah.
social distancing just by the way that art is made.
Exactly. Yeah, even like doing a one-man show, I'm thinking about the show that I did at the end of last year, and I'm like, I still interacted with him and like the crew members a lot. And so, yeah, I think there will be changes to how things run, even if we do open like a year from now, but hopefully people feel more comfortable and safer to come back. So
yeah. You're optimistic. and you all are moving house at the same time now, right?
Yeah, this month we're moving to Juliana's house. We're calling it Juliana's apartment.
Hey, Juliana.
Yeah.
And when's the actual date?
So we get the keys on Wednesday, and we're kind of just like slowly, because Omar is working like 9 to 5 essentially right now. And so pretty much after he's done working, we'll probably like move a suitcase down, and like we're gonna clean and like paint and stuff before moving our big stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the 24th is when we plan on like renting a car, and it's only like 10 blocks, so it's not that deep.
Great. And you have some time to figure it out, which is great.
Yeah, a lot of time.
Thanks, COVID.
Yeah.
Great. I want to ask you one last big question, which I've been asking everyone, which is, do you have any advice you would give yourself when you were 20, or someone starting out with the intent to have a career in stage management?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Like I feel like just be yourself and like be like confident in like your abilities and like your background, because like I said earlier, like people like to be, especially I feel like in our industry, people like to be really elitist about like where they went to college, or like, oh, well, I trained under blah, 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 blah. Who cares? Like, who cares? Honestly, I don't. And so like, if you have if you're blessed enough to be able to go to like afford a elite school to go to college, like fine, do it, like whatever. But also like, if I kind of like felt bad about like where I went to school for a while, and like honestly then I was working in the same places as other people where I was like, well, now I'm not as much in debt as you are. So like just be confident in like your abilities, and like don't let other people bring you down, honestly.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good advice. I think a lot of us, when we're in that age, 20 something, and you're starting out, and you just imposter syndrome is a real thing at any age, but it's so strong when you're that age, and you just feel like I am going to be found out any minute that I don't have the right credentials to do this job.
Exactly.
And I went through that so much in my time in Germany, and I wonder if you had this experience in Puerto Rico, but I was so embarrassed about grammar mistakes and like making things that really don't matter. And especially when you like put yourself in that position of, okay, when I've worked with people who English is their second language, I'm just super like thrilled and impressed that they can talk to me in my language. I'm not like judging their grammar. But when it's you, you're like, oh, I'm not going to contribute to this conversation, not because I don't have something good to say, but I'm worried I'm going to make a mistake.
Yeah. No, I feel that. And like a lot of people, I grew up in the Southwest too. So like I grew up around a lot of Mexican people, and like my Spanish sounds Mexican. And I didn't really like think about that, because that's just like where I grew up, and like I'm not Mexican, but like I grew up around a bunch of them. And so when I was in Puerto Rico, I was like talking to people, and they were like, "Are you Mexican? Because it sounds like you are." And I was just like, "No."
I'm one of you.
But it just like, so that was kind of interesting, something that I never thought about before. But like again, like imposter syndrome, it was just like,
yeah,
I'm just gonna talk.
Yeah, well, yeah, and you have to get over it and move and realize that I think was really powerful what you said about teamwork and stage management, and how yes, there may be a hierarchy, but that's very much secondary to the fact that you are all there for a purpose, and you're there to support and make something happen, and whether or not you're doing that in perfect language or not is really beside the point.
Yeah, especially because I was the only one who could speak Spanish, so they were all like,
yeah, they're like, cool, okay.
Yeah, I was like sick.
Awesome. Well, Fatimah, this has been so lovely talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to say or talk about before we sign off?
No, Black Lives Matter, but that's it.
Great. Love it. All right. Well, I hope you have a great time packing and moving, and hopefully you'll be back to work soon.
Off the Clock is part of our larger series, Digital Clock. Digital Clock is made possible by a generous gift from Phil and Liz Gross. If you'd like to learn more about our programming or how you can become a supporter, visit us at collegelightoperacompany.com. Tune in again next week for another installment of Off the Clock.